2 years ago, the name Arthur Fleck hit Gotham like a hurricane.
The trial of the century.
They believe Arthur Fleck to be some kind of martyr. Well, he's not. There's a monster.
When you're smiling, when you're smiling,
When I first saw Joker, when I saw you,
the whole world smiles with you.
for once in my life, I didn't feel so alone anymore.
Hello there. Have you fallen into an open manhole recently? Do you find yourself in the company of strangers? Well, then you might very well be in the feature underground. My name is still Hunter Lanier, and this week I will be reviewing, as you might have guessed, Joker, Folie, Deux. Before I start, I want to say that if you stay until the very end of the video, there will be a brief show and tell of some things that I got at the press screening. Before I get into my review, I'd like to sort of lay the groundwork by briefly touching upon my thoughts of the first movie, which I think color my opinions of the second movie as well, and just provide a greater context for my tastes and my interest. My issues with the first movie are twofold. The first one is that I think Todd Philips isn't exactly a tactful director. I think he paints with a very broad brush. I thought the emotions and the imagery in the first movie was just too big, too obvious. I think a lot of the images of the first movie are, to be frank, pretentious. My second issue is that I just felt, and this isn't unique to me, I know a lot of people brought this up as well, which is I just think the movie was a little too derivative of fairly recent, some would call them, as I would, masterpieces, Taxi Driver and The King of Comedy. Taxi Driver is itself based on Crime and Punishment, and you might even be able to call Raskolnikov the original Joker, in that he's an outcast who believes himself to be great, but the world doesn't recognize it, so he has to go out there and commit an atrocity to prove his greatness. So I don't think using something as influence or even as a framework is a bad thing. I just don't think Todd Phillips added enough to that. I don't want to call it a formula, but he didn't add enough to the scaffolding of that story. He didn't add anything artistically that I thought was very interesting. All that said, the ending of the first movie almost entirely redeemed the rest of the movie to me, because I thought it was that good. I thought the scene where the Joker shoots De Niro's talk show host on live television, I thought that was genuinely shocking, genuinely horrifying, and genuinely risky. Because even though this is an R-rated spin-off movie, this is still a big budget, big brand comic book movie. And honestly, I think that scene would have been risky in any kind of movie, in the smallest indie movie. Because it took its idea, which is let's make a Joker story, but ground him in the modern reality of attention-seeking, headline-seeking murderers, a world where there is growing distrust of the media, and a world where there is growing disgust for hacky celebrity types, especially talk show hosts. And it took that idea and it brought it to its authentic conclusion. And I think that was risky, and I think it paid off big time. So my thoughts going into the second movie were, will Todd Phillips paint with a finer brush this time around, be a little more subtle? Would the movie finally shed its reliance on other movies? And 3, would the movie retain its willingness to take risks and to make the audience uncomfortable? I enjoyed this movie more on a macro level than a micro level. What I mean by that is that this movie doesn't take a risk like the aforementioned climax of the first movie. There's nothing that even gets close to that moment. But the willingness to take risks is, in this case, baked into the DNA of what Joker Folie à Deux is. This is because this sequel is in its nature, and this is the crux of the movie. This movie is a deconstruction of the Joker mythos. It is a deconstruction of the first movie. It tears down everything that the first movie builds up. That's going to make it immediately unsatisfying to the majority of people that watch this movie who enjoyed the first movie. And on some level, I respect that. I respect that approach. Because to me, there's nothing worse than a movie that comes to the audience, gets down on its knees, and begs the audience to like it. There's nothing hackier than an artist who desperately tries to read the room and then regurgitate the audience's collective thought into their collective mouth. Movies, to me, should play hard to get. You should find yourself going toward the movie, trying to reach for the movie. The problem here is that even with that play hard to get attitude, which I like, I don't think this movie is as big of a catch as I think it thinks it is. One problem I have with this deconstruction concept is that to some degree it seems a little bit like a response to some criticisms of the first movie, which I think were unfounded. So I don't think it's a good idea to address them. One of those criticisms is that the first movie was a glorification of this very modern type of psychopath. But I don't think that first movie was a glorification. I think it was merely exploring that type of person in an authentic, uncomfortable way. And if you want to make something that's truly great, you will go places that other people aren't willing to go. And if you're going to explore this type of psychopath, you should do so without pulling punches. That's what you do when you're trying to make something truly great and truly honest. You know, if movies were just about making everyone feel good about themselves and patting you on the head and telling you everything's going to be all right, I would never go to the movies because that's not interesting to me. And so for that reason, I don't think it was a wise approach or an interesting approach to completely tear down this character to being just sort of a pathetic speck. Also, I think it's important to remember that there's a reason the Joker is one of the most popular characters to come out of 20th century fiction, and to maybe even become more popular in the 21st century. Especially when you consider that this is a character that has basically no redeeming qualities. It's not like he's Tony Soprano, where he goes out and kills people, and then he comes home and he watches TV and he plays Mario Kart with his son, and he's a loving family man and he has friends, and there's nothing like that with the Joker. He's just a homicidal psychopath. So then you naturally have to ask yourself, well, what is it about this character that people love? Is it because there's something dark in our nature that finds this type of person appealing? Is it because he seems completely uninhibited and free? And that we, as people with responsibilities and who abide by conventions and social mores, that we envy him in some way, that we wish we were him, or at least envy that aspect of him? These are ideas that I would have liked to have seen explored after the first movie establishes this character as this weird, demented cult hero. And instead of that, the movie chooses to go a different route. It chooses to deflate the character completely, to show that there is nothing to him other than a sad, traumatized little boy that lashed out at the world that was so mean to him. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Hunter, okay, the movie didn't tell the story and it didn't explore the ideas that you wanted it to explore. But you shouldn't hold that against it. It's just doing a different thing. It's telling a different story. And I agree. You shouldn't hold the movie accountable just because it didn't do the thing that you wanted it to do. Okay, so now I've recalibrated. I'm accepting that, okay, this movie is a deconstruction of the Joker character. Let's go with it. But the problem is that I don't think the movie is an interesting deconstruction of the Joker. So why is it uninteresting? Well, a lot of how this movie was sold is that it's a romance between the Joker and Harley Quinn, who has like a different name in the movie. And again, conceptually, okay, that's an interesting idea. That sounds pretty damn fun. This is going to be a movie. It's going to be like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, but with a romance between these two homicidal freaks. And it's going to be a twisted romance. It's going to be sweet, but it's also going to be disturbing and weird. Okay. And yet, even though that's what this movie is sold as this romance between the Joker and Harley Quinn, the movie never commits to that romance. It never commits to that story. It is entirely focused on deconstructing the Joker myth. And even this romance gets kind of brushed to the side. The deconstruction sucks up all of the narrative bandwidth from the rest of the movie. And ironically, this proves detrimental to that deconstruction storyline because a believable love affair between the Joker and Harley Quinn, one that the audience gets into, and despite the disturbing nature of it, find themselves kind of rooting for these two lovebirds. If that was a part of the movie, this deconstruction aspect of the movie would have had the tragic element it needs to be successful. Another aspect of the movie that takes away from the romance and takes away from the things that might have made the movie more interesting is that a lot of the movie is a courtroom drama. And a lot of this part of the movie, it feels like the Seinfeld finale.
How everyone who has come into contact with these four individuals has been abused, wronged, deceived, and betrayed. This time.
It's just a lot of retreading of the first movie. And again, not adding anything new, not changing our perspective on the first movie, but just sort of reminding everyone what happened. I think this courtroom drama section is a total wash, save for there's some pretty fun Joker reactions to testimonies and such, but that's about it. The other thing you've probably heard about this movie is that it's a musical. Well, sort of. My first issue with the musical portions of this movie is that they are almost exclusively in Joker's head. So the things that happen during these musical portions have no stakes. Now, that wouldn't be a big deal if these mind musicals were revealing something about Joker's inner psyche, but they don't really. And what they do reveal is pretty flat and one-dimensional. Now, then the next level is, okay, they don't have any stakes. They don't reveal anything about the character, but maybe they're super stylish and entertaining. If something is sufficiently stylish, I don't need substance. But sadly, that is not the case either. The musical numbers feel pretty uninspired. I think my favorite one was actually, I think it's the first one, where the Joker sings Stevie Wonder's For Once in My Life to a lot of the other inmates. And the way he does it, the way Joaquin Phoenix sings it, it really does feel like it's just dialogue coming out of his mouth. And he kind of paints the song in a new light. And you don't really get that with the other musical numbers in the movie. And also, what I don't get about these musical numbers is why do they exist in his head? Why can't they be real? Musicals exist in a world where people break into song and no one bats an eye. It's totally normal. It's an inherently anarchic universe, one that you think would be perfectly suited to the Joker. But even when he's singing For Once in My Life to the inmates, for some reason that has to be fake. Why couldn't that have been a real scene? The movie seems weirdly committed to the idea of realism, and I don't think that's useful for the movie. I'll end this review just by saying once again that as negative as this review might have sounded, I do appreciate that this movie was trying to avoid expectations. You know, when I walked out of the movie, I felt unsatisfied. And so I thought, well, do I feel unsatisfied because the movie was bad? Or do I feel unsatisfied because the movie wasn't what I wanted it to be? Or did I feel unsatisfied because the movie was intentionally unsatisfying? And I think all of those are true. In fact, I remember hearing a story about pre-Seinfeld, pre-Rich Larry David, where he went up on stage to do a set, looked at the audience, said, "I don't think so," and just walked off stage. Watching this movie, I think, is probably how it felt being in the audience of that comedy club. Oh, and one last thing. My theater did this really strange thing where there were 2 projectors on both sides of the theater. So not only were you getting a projection of the movie in front of you, but you were getting projections on your left and right. I don't think it worked. And I think some of my negative feelings about this movie might have even been influenced by that, because those 2 projectors weren't on all of the time. They only came on during certain scenes. And it felt like someone was turning on the lights in the movie theater, just by virtue of having 2 light projectors shooting in addition to 1. So I thought it was distracting. I didn't think it added anything to it. It didn't seem like Todd Philips made the movie with this projection style, experimental projection style in mind. I know we're in a time when people are wondering about, will people still be going to theaters? Are theaters in trouble? And so this does seem like a new version of 3D. Unless you film a movie with this in mind, I don't think it's going to add much to the experience. And if anything, like it did with me, take away from the experience. Well, those were my thoughts on Joker, Folie, Deux. But my review is just the conversation starter, so I want you to go into the comments and leave your thoughts on my thoughts, as well as your thoughts on the movie once you see it. I was really happy with my Megalopolis review that just came out. I was really happy with the comment section. I think there was a lot of good-spirited conversation, and even when people disagreed with me, they did it in a respectful, thoughtful way. Keep your comments thoughtful, respectful. This is about having interesting discussions. Let's leave emotion out of it. I would like this channel to be a place where people can come and have thoughtful discussions about movies. If you liked the video, if you like what I had to say, if you disagreed with me but liked the way I said it, go ahead and leave a little like on the video, maybe even a little subscribe, maybe even a little tell your friends, maybe even a little share the video. As I leave you with this, the undeniable truth that every day underground is a good day. This is a gigantic poster they gave me at the screening. Ugh. What I don't understand is that this side is backwards, but on the camera it's the right side. And then on the back of the poster, it's the same thing but reversed. So I don't know what the point of that is. Maybe someone can inform me. But see, the cool thing about this stuff is that as this channel grows, I do get free stuff, so I can do giveaways and that sort of thing. So look forward to that, and that's why you should tell all your friends to subscribe. Subscribe if you want free stuff in the future. The other thing I got is this Joker pin. Free Joker. I will never ever wear this. It will live in my drawer forever.